It's an interesting question, and thank you for that. The answer is that Blue Sky just overall is decentralized. It was built from the very beginning as a decentralized protocol, and then the app was added 2 years ago when the acquisition of Twitter began. So as a result, everything is decentralized, and it both makes things very different as well as sometimes makes them more complicated. So it's largely different, but what that means for the user is that in many ways, different types of speech can be accepted, understood, and exist at the same time compared to a centralized social media platform in which there's only one size fits all, and it usually comes down to who the billionaire owner of that site is at that given time. Coming onto Blue Sky, the way we do it is that we're the main app existing on the protocol, but other apps, other networks can exist. And the cool part is any user can also start up their own moderation service. So we, at the core, we take down the worst content because that you need to do for the overall network. But for the rest of our decisions, most of them are actually labels. We're just applying labels to a wide range of content. And then any user can go in and toggle those labels. You can hide stuff by default. You can give you a warning label on it, or you can just show it and remove our labels and say that no, that's not an issue for me. I want that experience for myself. That's the type of speech I can handle. So I think overall, Blue Sky gives you much greater plurality of speech. And then we have shared block lists and third-party labelers. And together that gives you an ecosystem where you can have kind of a cozier internet experience than you have on these wide-ranging platforms, because with community labelers, with these shared block lists, you can have more of a safer space for you and your community than everyone's yelling at each other all the time. People sometimes call it a PvP environment, which is the type of environment we're not trying to create. We're trying to create something that's a little bit more welcoming. And that really is baked in the design philosophy of Blue Sky. So hopefully that answered the question. So in the long term, I think there's a lot that can happen with third party and community led moderators. And we're really at the start of the experiment. And apart from places like Reddit that have done it in specific communities, you haven't seen this done network wide before. So it's a new experience. People aren't used to having it this way. We're still figuring out how to get it right. So we're less than a year in. There have been bumps along the road. And we're still figuring out what level of support we need to give. Do we need to be more engaged? How do we do so without having any editorial control so that these third-party moderators can have their own decisions and operate perfectly independently? One of the things that's happening as we grow is you're having more institutions and organizations that are coming in and making their home here. And if they treat it just like a normal platform, that's perfectly fine. But my hope is once people get established and learn the ins and outs of Blue Sky and how it's different under the hood, then they start to make this place their home. So that could be an institution such as perhaps a fact checker, labeling content that isn't factual. Um, Perhaps it can be an institution that is labeling hateful speech or things that go against a specific nuance where they have far more expertise than a centralized moderation service can get. Where I've seen this have the most success is right now we have, for example, an anti-trans labeler. And they go in and look for the coded language and things like that, which we aren't necessarily going to pick up. We're doing our best effort to scale up a team, moderators around the world, but they're not necessarily going to pick up that nuance. So where I'm seeing the most success so far is these community level moderators, Black Sky, for example, which is the Black community, and then they are adding different levels of moderation service so the Black community can have a home here and not be exposed to various levels of attack, et cetera, on those communities. So both institutions and community level moderators, I'm hoping, will figure out the sweet spot and their maturity in the long term, but we're still very much figuring it out, both for centralized moderation from Blue Sky, as well as how to get it right for the third party side. Yeah, and generally speaking, our model in terms of user freedom, gives users a lot more freedom to choose the experience you want. I think one of the there's a lot of tension right now in between what is freedom of speech. And freedom of speech can mean that basically nearly all speech is included, but then that results in you have to go through the psychic damage of attacks and people saying you shouldn't exist, etc., on a daily basis. And that's not what we believe our users want. They want, and that's the message we've heard, a more safe and welcoming environment that they can come into that gives them many more user controls to eliminate some of the bad content they don't want to see. So from a centralized perspective, what we're trying to do is we're trying to remove the most disruptive content. If someone's coming on just to troll people or harass people, we want to take that down. If it's spam, we want to take that. And we want to allow users to have genuine conversations between each other and connect with other users and reinforce these pro-social behaviors when they're on Bluesky. We want them to just have social media that's enjoyable again. So to that extent, we are removing certain content, but then the rest of it, we're just labeling and allowing them to choose which type of speech they want to encounter on a daily basis, and then giving them a huge amount of user controls to block, mute, as well as sign up for these third-party moderation capabilities, allowing just a significantly wider plurality of speech to exist at the same time, rather than saying we only accept this one size fits all model of speech, and it's either this way or this way. And you basically have to choose a platform that aligns with your form of speech. And we're saying, look, you should be able to have a spectrum of speech that exists all at the same time, but we'll give you the tools to enjoy that experience. And well, it's an experiment, and but that's our vision, and we hope it succeeds. So at the core, the same challenges exist no matter where you're doing trust and safety, because users don't care whether you have customizable moderation or decentralized moderation, et cetera. They still have the same expectations, if you will. They expect moderation to happen immediately. They expect it to have deep context and understand all the histories of the interactions between the individuals, sometimes um, factoring in all of their offline behavior as well. And third, they want it to be perfect slash values aligned, in that they want the decision to align with their perspective and worldview. So hopefully the takeaway that you've taken from these 3 points is that content moderation is impossible, and I probably need to do a lot more therapy for choosing this as my career. But in addition to that, there's further complexities when you're trying to do it in a decentralized and composable moderation way. From a centralized perspective, you have to, first off, we're taking in significantly less data than these major platforms are. We're trying to be more privacy focused. We're trying not to suck in huge amounts of data because we want to be responsible stewards of that. What that means, though, is I don't know someone's whole life history and all their purchases, acquisitions, everything they've done on the internet. I'm working with a significantly less rich amount of data. And then as Bluesky decentralizes further, I get less and less signal coming in. So it's actually much harder to make centralized decisions, but that's what we've architected for the strength of the network and for it to grow over time as an ecosystem. Furthermore, we have these third-party moderations that we're trying to build out the composable layer, and that's also a work in progress to try and figure out how much outreach, how much communication do we have to have with them? Do they need support from us? Do they need resources? How can we give them resources but keep them independent? So there's a lot of challenges we're still trying to resolve, and I hope we figure out, the right answers or the right range of answers in the next 6 months or so that we can really see composable moderation take off and users be able to disregard a lot of Bluesky's choices and really pick some successful third-party moderations that they trust to give them a much more customizable, value-aligned experience. Well, first off, I don't get out very much. This job is pretty consuming. So when I get to go out to a conference with a lot of trust and safety professionals, the thing I usually look most forward to is catching up with old and new colleagues, people that I used to work with, people that we used to cross paths all the time. I love the chance to see all these faces. And then there's just a lot of people that I follow, like Jeff Dunn, for example, that we've never met in person, but I look forward to putting a name to a face in person. And the second thing that I'm looking forward to at this is you put together a very interesting group of people, and I can't do things the same way as large platforms. I can't copy the models that Facebook is doing or TikTok is doing because it would bankrupt the company overnight since we're a pre-revenue startup. So I'm always looking for good ideas of how to do things more efficiently, more lean, so that we can still scale as an app and make our users happy to the best of our ability, but trying to balance all the considerations for how tiny we are. So I'm really looking forward to the one or two great ideas that I'll see out there and go, oh yeah, we should really do that. And that's probably from a takeaway perspective what I'm most excited about.